A quarter-mile across a city that wanted them all dead, a machine gun had the whole team pinned to the floor, dying one at a time. And the person who picked up that rifle and ended it with 2 breaths and 2 shots was the same person those men had spent weeks calling the mute. The woman they told to go make coffee. The one they swore would get them all killed. They had her figured out from the day she walked in. They were wrong about every single piece of it. And in about 40 minutes, all of them were going to learn just how wrong, in a way not one of them ever forgot. But to understand how a quiet corpsman ended up saving the lives of the very men who mocked her, you have to go back. Back before Ramadi. Back to a little house near the border in El Paso, where a girl learned the one thing that would later make her deadlier than any man in that unit. She learned how to be calm exactly where everyone else falls apart. The boot came down on her rifle case before she even sat. Steel scraped across the plywood floor of the briefing tent, and the whole recon team turned to watch it slide. Corporal Dolan had kicked it like a soda can, and now he stood over it with his arms crossed, grinning at the woman who had just walked in. "Wrong tent, sweetheart," he said. "Coffee's 2 doors down. Go fix us a pot, corpsman." The laughter came fast and easy, the way it always does when 6 men decide one person doesn't belong. It bounced off the canvas walls. It filled the small hot space. And Petty Officer Second Class Renata Vasquez stood there in the doorway with the desert sun burning white behind her, and she said nothing at all. She just looked at him. 2 heartbeats. No anger in it. No fear. Something worse than both. The flat, patient stillness of a person who has already decided how this ends. Then she crouched, picked up her case, set it on the bench, and began checking her scope. Calm. Quiet, while the men laughed at her back. 40 minutes later, every man in that tent would be alive because of the woman they told to go make coffee. But she'd never say a word about it. That wasn't her way. You see, they had a name for Renata Vasquez out there in Ramadi. They called her the Mute. Now hold on. Hold on just a second. Let me back this thing up, because you walked in on the middle of it, and the middle don't mean a damn thing until you know how she got there. Pour yourself something. Sit down. This one's worth the time. That woman in the doorway, the one they called the Mute, her name was Renata Vasquez. Petty Officer Second Class. United States Navy. A corpsman. Now, for those of you who never served, a corpsman is the sailor who goes into the fight with the Marines and keeps them breathing when the bad day comes. They patch the holes. They hold the hands. They are, more often than not, the last friendly face a man sees, and the reason a whole lot of others get to see home again. That's a hard enough job for any human being alive. But Renata Vasquez did something most folks never even attempt. She cross-rated. That's the Navy's word for it. She went and qualified as a sniper on top of being a corpsman. She learned to read the wind. She learned to slow her own heartbeat down between the beats and put a round through a window the size of a playing card from a quarter-mile out. So when she walked into that tent, she wasn't some lost girl who took a wrong turn looking for the mess hall. She was one of maybe a handful of women on that entire deployment who could heal you and could end the man trying to kill you. Both, with the same two hands. And Corporal Dolan looked at all of that, and he saw a woman, and he decided she was there to make his coffee. Now here's the thing I learned a long time ago, and I'll give it to you for free. The loudest man in the room is almost never the one you need to watch. He's busy telling everybody how dangerous he is. The dangerous one, the truly dangerous one, is usually sitting in the back, quiet, patient, watching, saying nothing at all. The wind doesn't lie, friend. People do. And Renata Vasquez had stopped wasting her breath on people a long time ago. So stay with me, because the day those men laughed at her is the day they'll never forget for the rest of their lives. To understand the quiet, you have to understand where it came from. Renata Vasquez grew up in El Paso, Texas, in a small stucco house 3 blocks from the border, where you could stand on the back step at night and see the lights of 2 countries at the same time. Her mother cleaned offices downtown. Her father was gone before she was old enough to remember the shape of his face. And Renata was the oldest of 4, which in a house like that means you stop being a child somewhere around the age of 9, whether anybody tells you to or not. She learned early that talking didn't fix much. When her little brother spiked a fever at 2 in the morning and there was no money for a doctor, talking about it didn't bring the fever down. Cool cloths brought it down. Steady hands brought it down. Knowing what to do, and doing it without panic, that's what brought it down. So she watched. She read whatever she could get her hands on. And by the time she was 12, she could splint a sprained wrist, and stop a bloody nose, and talk a scared kid into holding still, all without raising her voice once. The neighbors started knocking on her door before they knocked on anyone else's. She wasn't loud, even then. Loud was her mother's boyfriend slamming cabinet doors. Loud was the men who whistled at her from the corner when she walked her sisters to school. In Renata's experience, the people who made the most noise were almost always the ones you had to manage, calm down, or get away from. The noise was the warning. The quiet was where the real work got done. So when she walked into a Navy recruiting office at 18, with a folder of high school transcripts and a calm she had earned the hard way, the recruiter asked her why the Navy, and she said 3 words. I fix people. That was it. He waited for more. There wasn't any more. And something about the way she said it made him stop talking too. She went corpsman because it was the truest thing she knew how to be. She was good at it. Better than good. In her first posting, she had a reputation inside a month, the kind that travels quietly between Marines who don't agree on much else. If Doc Vasquez was on the patrol, you came home. She had hands that didn't shake. She had a way of looking at a wound that took the fear out of the room. Men twice her size, men who'd never admit being scared of anything, would settle the second she crouched beside them and said, in that low, even voice, "Look at me, you're going to be fine." She believed in that work. She believed in it the way other people believe in church. But somewhere along the way, Renata started to understand a hard truth about her own job. A corpsman shows up after the bullet has already done its work, after the bleeding has already started. She spent her whole career arriving 1 second too late, trying to undo damage that a single round had done in a single heartbeat. And she got to thinking, if one round could do all of that in less time than it takes to blink, then maybe the most healing thing a person could do wasn't to patch the wound at all. Maybe it was to stop the man who was about to make it. That's a strange road to walk, from healer to shooter. Most people can't square it in their heads. But Renata had been squaring impossible things since she was 9 years old in a house near the border, and to her it wasn't a contradiction at all. It was the same job from the other end. Keep my people breathing, whatever that takes. A bandage or a bullet. She would carry both. So she put in for the cross rate. And here is where the noise started. Because the moment a corpsman, a woman, put in paperwork to train as a sniper, every loud voice in the chain had something to say about it. She heard all of it. She heard the comments in the chow hall, and the comments she wasn't supposed to hear through tent walls. She heard a senior man laugh and say they'd let anybody hold a rifle these days. She heard the word distraction. She heard the word charity case. She heard a dozen men explain to each other, with great confidence, exactly why she would wash out. Renata did not argue with a single one of them. She let them talk. She let them be as loud as they wanted. And while they talked, she trained. She trained until her shoulders ached and her eyes burned, and the rifle stopped feeling like a tool and started feeling like a part of her own hand. She learned the wind. She learned the math. She learned to lie perfectly still in the heat with sweat running into her eyes and her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, and to wait and squeeze between the beats. She didn't just pass. She finished near the top, and nobody who outscored her was a corpsman, and nobody who outscored her was a woman, and most of them had a whole career of nothing but shooting behind them. But here's the part that tells you everything about Renata Vasquez. When she got the qualification, the thing she had bled for, the thing they all said she couldn't do, she didn't post it anywhere. She didn't say a word. She folded the certificate, put it in the bottom of her sea bag, and went back to work. Let them keep talking, she figured. The wind would tell the truth soon enough. You hear that? She finished near the top, and she didn't tell a soul. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I have been around the military my whole adult life, and I am here to tell you that is the rarest thing in the world. Most people, they do one good thing, and they will tell you about it for the next 30 years. They get one ribbon, and they want a parade. There is nothing wrong with being proud. But pride that needs an audience, that's a different animal. That's a man who isn't sure of himself, looking for you to be sure of him instead. Renata Vasquez was already sure. She didn't need a single one of those men to believe in her, because she believed in the work, and the work doesn't care what anybody thinks. A bullet goes where the wind and the mass send it. It does not check your gender first. It does not ask if the people in the tent respected you. The rifle is the most honest thing in that whole story, and she trusted it more than she trusted any of them. And let me tell you something about that cross rate, because I don't want you to breeze past it. To be a corpsman is to spend your whole life running toward the screaming. To be a sniper is to spend your whole life in silence. Those are two opposite human beings. One lives in the chaos with his hands deep in the worst moment of somebody's life. The other lives in the stillness, alone, patient, far away, holding their breath. Almost nobody can be both. The wiring in your head that makes you good at one usually makes you bad at the other. She was both. She could run into the screaming, and she could live in the silence. And the reason she could do both, I think, is the same reason. She had learned, way back as a little girl in El Paso, to be calm exactly where everybody else came apart. That's not a skill you pick up at a school. That's something life carves into you, usually the hard way. So when these men looked at her and saw a woman who didn't talk and figured she was timid, or slow, or didn't belong, they had it exactly backwards. The quiet wasn't weakness. The quiet was the loudest thing about her, if you knew how to listen. Men hunt with their ego, friend. They want to be seen doing it. Women like Renata, they hunt still. And still is what kills. Now, let's get to Corporal Dolan. Because, Lord, did that man like the sound of his own voice. The unit was a Marine reconnaissance team operating out of Ramadi in the spring of 2008, and Ramadi in those days was about as bad a place as the war had to offer. Renata was attached to them as their corpsman. That was the official reason she was there. The sniper qualification, she kept that quiet, the way she kept everything quiet. As far as Dolan and the rest of them knew, she was just document. The woman who'd patched them up. The woman, period. And to a man like Brett Dolan, that was a problem he intended to solve with his mouth. Dolan was a corporal, which meant he had just enough rank to be dangerous and not nearly enough to be wise. He was big, he was loud, and he was good at exactly one thing, which was making the men around him laugh at somebody else's expense. You know the type. Every workplace has one. The difference is, in a recon team, that man's mouth can get people killed, because a unit that's busy laughing at one of its own is a unit that isn't watching its sectors. From the first day she arrived, Dolan made Renata his project. It started small, the way it always does. He'd call her sweetheart instead of document. He'd ask her, real loud so everyone could hear, if she was sure she could lift her own medical bag, or did she need one of the men to carry it for her. He'd grin while he said it, like it was all a big joke, and the new guys would laugh because laughing along was safer than not. Renata didn't laugh. She didn't frown either. She just did her job and let it roll off, which only seemed to make him push harder. When the rolling off didn't get a rise out of her, Dolan got meaner. He started in on her quiet. "Cat got your tongue, Doc? What's the matter, you don't talk?" He'd wave a hand in front of her face. "Hello? Anybody home in there?" He told the others she was probably slow. He said maybe she didn't talk because she had nothing worth saying. He said a real shooter would have put him in his place by now, and the fact that she didn't just proved she was soft. And every time, Renata looked at him with that same flat, patient calm, and said nothing at all. She cleaned her weapon. She checked her med kit. She studied the maps of the sector when the others were sleeping. She watched. She always watched. The other men noticed it, even if they wouldn't say so in front of Dolan. There was something unsettling about a person who would not take the bait. Most people, you push them, they push back, and then you know where you stand. But you couldn't get a read on Doc Vasquez. you'd throw everything you had at that wall, and the wall would just look at you. A couple of the younger Marines started getting quiet around her themselves, the way you get quiet around something you don't fully understand. There was one private, a kid named Hollis, barely 19, who tore his hand open on a strand of concertina wire during a night movement. Bad gash, bleeding everywhere, the kid white as a sheet and starting to panic. And it was Renata who got to him, dropped into the dirt beside him, took that ruined hand in both of hers, and said low and even, "Look at me. Just look at me. You're going to be fine." And the kid looked at her, and somehow he believed her, and he stopped shaking while she stitched him up by the light of a red lens in the dark. Hollis never laughed at her again. Not once. But Dolan, he doubled down. Because to a man like Dolan, the fact that the team was starting to respect her was the most threatening thing of all. The day before the patrol that changed everything, in front of the whole team, he picked up her rifle case, hefted it like he was weighing it, and said maybe Doc should leave the heavy stuff to the men and stick to bandages. Said the rifle was probably just for show anyway. Said he'd bet money she'd never even fired the thing outside a range, and a range don't shoot back. The men chuckled. Dolan grinned, real pleased with himself. And Renata took the case out of his hands, gently, the way you'd take something fragile from a child, and set it down where it belonged, and said nothing. That was the day before. The next morning, they rolled out into the city, and the city had been waiting for them. Hey, before I tell you what happened in that city, do me one favor. If you've ever been the quiet one in a room full of loud people, if you've ever had somebody decide who you were before you said a single word, then you already know how this feels in your gut. So let me know you're out there. And stay with me, because what these men learned in the next 40 minutes, they carried for the rest of their lives. Now let's go to Ramadi. The mission was supposed to be simple, and in that war, simple was usually a lie you told yourself before the shooting started. The team rolled out at first light to set up an overwatch position on the eastern edge of the district. There had been reports of fighters moving weapons through a cluster of buildings near an open market, and the recon team's job was to get eyes on it, confirm or deny, and call it in. Get in quiet. Watch. Get out. Nobody was supposed to fire a shot. They moved into a half-collapsed 3-story building that gave them a clean view of the market square and the streets feeding into it. Dolan was running point on the security element. The team's designated marksman, a lean Marine named Tucker, set up his rifle on the second floor with his spotter beside him. Renata set up her aid station back in a protected corner, laid out her gear, and did what she always did. She watched the sectors, the rooftops, the doorways, the way the few civilians in the square moved, and more importantly, the way they suddenly stopped moving. Because that's the thing about an ambush. The street tells you before the enemy does. The vendors disappear. The kids who are always there vanish. The square goes quiet in a way that has nothing to do with peace. Renata saw it before anyone said a word. The market emptied out in under a minute. A woman pulled her child inside and shut a metal door. An old man folded his cart and was gone. And the square sat there in the morning light, empty and wrong, the silence screaming if you knew how to hear it. She moved to Tucker and tapped his boot. When he looked back, she pointed at the empty square and then drew one finger flat across the rooftops. Tucker had been around long enough to read it. His face changed. He keyed his radio to warn the team. He was half a second too late. The first burst came from a window across the square and caught Tucker high in the shoulder before the sound of it even reached them. He went down hard, his rifle clattering, blood already spreading dark across his blouse. His spotter dove for cover. And then the whole world came apart at once. Fire poured in from 3 directions, from the windows across the square, from a rooftop to the north, from a doorway down the feeding street. The recon team was pinned in that half-collapsed building with fighters on 3 sides and 1 man already down and bleeding bad. And here is where Renata Vasquez stopped being one thing and became both at the same time. She was on Tucker in an instant, dragging him back behind the broken wall by his drag handle, her hands already working. The round had gone through high and clean, missing the artery, but he was bleeding fast, and he was out of the fight. She packed the wound, got pressure on it, said the words, low and even, into his face. "Look at me. You're going to be fine." And he looked at her, and even through the noise and the pain, he believed her. But she could see the bigger problem from where she knelt. The team's only long gun was lying on the floor where Tucker had dropped it. The fire from that north rooftop was the worst of it, a machine gun position raking the whole second floor, pinning every man on the team flat and making it impossible to move, impossible to fight back, impossible to get anyone out. As long as that gun was up, they were going to die in that building one at a time. Dolan was screaming into the radio for support that was minutes away, minutes they did not have. Renata finished tying off Tucker's pressure dressing. She put his good hand on top of it and pressed down so he'd hold it himself. And then, calm as anything, she reached over, picked up his rifle, and slid into the spot beside the broken window. Dolan saw her do it. Even pinned down, even in the middle of all the noise, he saw the corpsman pick up the deadweight rifle, and he screamed at her, "What the hell are you doing? Put it down. You're going to get us all killed." Renata didn't answer him. She never did. She settled the rifle against her shoulder. She found the rooftop in her scope. The machine gun position was a long way off, across the square and up, behind a low parapet, with only the gunner's head and shoulders showing in the gaps when he fired. Maybe a quarter mile, with a crosswind kicking grit across the square, and the whole building shaking around her. And Renata Vasquez did the thing she had taught herself to do in a house near the border a long time ago, the thing she did better than almost anyone alive. She got calm exactly where everyone else came apart. The noise fell away. The screaming fell away. Dolan fell away. She read the wind off the dust in the square. She did the math without thinking about the math. She felt her own heartbeat, fast at first, and she slowed it, breath by breath, down and down, until there was a long quiet space between one beat and the next. And in that space, she squeezed. The rifle bucked. Across the square, a quarter mile away, the gunner dropped behind the parapet and did not come back up. The machine gun went silent. For 1 second, the whole battle seemed to hold its breath. Then Renata shifted the rifle, found the window where the first burst had come from, breathed out, and fired again. And a second fighter folded and was gone. She worked the bolt and moved to the doorway down the street, calm, methodical, one target at a time, the same flat patience she'd shown that man who kicked her case across the floor. The fire coming in faltered. Then it broke. Without the machine gun pinning the team, the rest of the Marines came up off the floor and into the fight, and what had been a slaughter turned, in the space of a minute, into the enemy breaking and running. When the support element finally rolled in, they found a recon team alive, every single one of them, a wounded marksman stable and breathing, and a quiet woman kneeling back beside her patient with her hands already pressed to his wound again, the rifle set aside, like she'd only borrowed it for a moment and was giving it back. Dolan knelt a few feet away, chest heaving, staring at her like he'd never seen her before in his life. Because the truth is, he hadn't. It was quiet in that building when it was over. The kind of quiet that comes after, when your ears are still ringing and your hands won't quite stop shaking, and you're taking a head count, touching each man like you can't believe he's still there. Dolan was the one who finally spoke. He came over to where she knelt beside Tucker, and the loud was all gone out of him. Whatever he'd been the day before, kicking her case across the floor, telling her to go make coffee, that man wasn't in the building anymore. He looked at the rifle on the floor beside her. He looked at the rooftop across the square. And he tried to do the math, the impossible distance of it, the wind, the shaking building, the head and shoulders in a gap, and he couldn't make it add up to anything but a thing he didn't have a word for. "You're a shooter," he said. It came out almost like a question. "You're qualified. Why didn't you ever say anything? Why didn't you tell us?" And Renata Vasquez, for the first time in that whole deployment, looked Brett Dolan dead in the eye and answered him. She said, "You weren't listening anyway." That was all. She turned back to her patient, put her hands on the wound, and went back to the work. And Dolan knelt there in the dust with those 4 words landing on him one at a time, because he understood, finally, that she'd been telling him who she was every single day. Not with her mouth, with her stillness, with her steady hands, with the way she watched the rooftops while he watched himself. He just hadn't known how to hear any of it, because he'd already decided what she was before she walked through the tent flap. They medevac Tucker out. He lived. He's got a family today, kids of his own, and he tells them their dad is alive because of a corpsman who could shoot. Every man on that team went home. Every one. And not a single one of them ever called her the mute again. They called her document. They said it the way you say a word you're a little afraid of. And when she walked into a tent after that, the loud ones got quiet, and the quiet ones sat up, because they had all learned the same lesson in the same 40 minutes. Renata never put in for a medal. The team's report told the truth of it, and the people who needed to know knew. But she didn't talk about it. She finished that deployment the way she'd started it, watching the rooftops, keeping her people breathing, folding the proof of who she was down into the bottom of her bag where it didn't need an audience. She'd been right all along. The wind told the truth eventually. It always does. So let me leave you with the thing I want you to carry out of here. There is a lie in this world that says the strong are the loud, that the one doing all the talking is the one in charge, and the quiet one in the corner is weak or slow or doesn't belong. We fall for it constantly. We size people up by the volume of their voice instead of the weight of their hands. And every so often, life teaches a roomful of people just how badly they had it backwards, and it is never gentle about the lesson. Corporal Dolan looked at a woman and saw someone to make coffee. What was actually sitting in that tent was the most capable person in the building. The one who could heal you and stop the man trying to kill you, both, with the same two steady hands. She'd been telling him the whole time. He just measured her by his own noise and came up with the wrong answer. So here's what I'd ask you to do. Be a little slower to decide who somebody is. The quiet one isn't empty. More often than not, the quiet one is the one who has already done the work, already done the math, already knows exactly how this ends, and is just waiting, patient, for the rest of you to catch up. The loudest man in the room is rarely the strongest. He's just the one most afraid of being missed. And the strongest person you'll ever meet? You probably won't hear them coming at all. Look at me. You're going to be fine. She said it to a dying man, and he believed her, and he lived. I think there's a whole sermon in just those words. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't to shout. It's to stay calm in the one place everybody else falls apart, and to hold the line quiet until the people they love get to go home. Renata Vasquez did that. Quietly. The way she did everything. Take care of yourselves out there, and listen for the quiet ones.